It is, looks like we're recording, so it should be good.
Okay, so, well, hi everyone. Welcome to the first NEM documentation meeting. The objectives of these meetings are to talk about documentation, needs and issues, plan doc releases, and create an environment between different entities and individuals as well to make the NEM documentation better. So if you want, as we are like not so many people, but we will record these sessions, I will suggest to introduce a little bit ourselves, say, for example, what is your username, and how are you involved in NEM currently. So for Break the Ice, I will start first. I'm David. I'm a committee in the nemtech-sig-docs repository. I'm now working for NEM Foundation Europe, to be more precise, and I'm part of the COE. So we can do like a round. If you can introduce yourself, Nate.
Hello, I'm Nate. Username is Kaizen. And I am kind of part on the tech development side, more so on the project and product management side for Catapult and Tech Bureau and the varying services that we're releasing around it. And then just in general, kind of working with the community and the open source effort, which I'll talk about more in a few seconds here.
Okay, perfect. And Ivy, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit your current role in NEM Foundation?
Hi, Ivy here. My username is Ivy from IVYFUNG8. I'm based in Malaysia. Basically, what I do more is on training as well as some documentations. So this basically is most of the time that I spend.
Okay, good. Do we have someone else join, or right now we are just the three of us?
I think those, yeah, I think that's the core participants right now. Yeah, that's what's showing up on my end. Okay.
Okay, so maybe we can continue. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Nate, I don't know if you want to add something else about what's the PMC to give a brief introduction to these meetings. So it's like a kind of a new setup that has been published on GitHub, and I would like you to do a first introduction so we can like put some context in the next talks we are going to have.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, so again, I'm Nate, username Kaizen, and do a lot of effort to drive kind of, let's call it the kind of process and setup of the open source side. So I have a long background in development and open source and commercial software, enterprise software. Spent a lot of time at the Apache Foundation as well as the Linux Foundation. So a lot of the things we're doing and targeting to do with NEM and what's branded as the nemtech community stems from these, let's call them longstanding open source practices where you have a wide range of groups of people that are working in the community as well as for different commercial entities. The core of it's all located on GitHub. So the group name nemtech, everything that is essentially either officially supported or is even prototype demo ready will show up as a repo and a project under the nemtech. And the current repo we're actually looking at right now is the community repo, and think of this as more of a documentation repo that kind of outlines the current state of what we're targeting with the community, certain overviews and processes, and what we refer to as groups within the community. And we have two types of groups. We have SIGs, which stands for Special Interest Group, and then we have working groups. We give you more details so you can go and read the specifics on the repo, but at a high level, the majority of the groups are always going to be special interest groups. So currently we're doing the first meeting for the documentation special interest group. So what you can think this of is anyone who's actively working on creating and supporting documentation for the community at large. It doesn't matter for what part of the project, whether it's Catapult server, or it's a future wallet or blockchain explorer or SDK library, anything documentation related will live under the interest group. David, because he's kind of the leading contributor and creator, and that's kind of he's been like doing all the heavy lifting on documentation, you can think of him as the go-to point person, chairperson for the group. And over time, we have a couple other people from the community that are doing translations and contributions back, that are doing pull requests for other documentation content that we just haven't had the time to get around to yet. And that's kind of how the group will focus. It also will focus on documentation process. So as existing technology that currently runs under nemtech, such as Catapult server and the API gateway, as well as new tech that will appear, again, such as wallets and blockchain explorers, the documentation group actually kind of sits at the center. Because you want to make sure that things are properly documented. It's never going to be perfect, but you want it to be as good as possible. So that's what these groups exist for. So currently, we have a small list of group that are currently defined. We have actually, if you can scroll up to the directory structure. So this is the docs group. And we'll just kind of go, we don't have to go into details on each one. I'll just give kind of high level. So we have the SIG API group. Right now, the API is probably the biggest catch-all one. The API group is anything literally API related. The SDKs, the gateway server, and then currently also things such as the actual blockchain, the ledger data format too would fall under the API. So anything that actually is the nuts and bolts with how the system's working gets lumped under the API group. And as time progresses, we will maybe break things out. So we might end up having an SDK special interest group, but right now it's not needed. We're just getting started. We only have a couple supported SDKs. The Block Explorer group, that one that pretty much warrants its kind of own because it's going to be a relatively decent sized effort. So that's pretty self-explanatory. It's anything blockchain explorer related. We'll have at least one supported core community blockchain explorer. The SIG client group is the special interest group for anything client related. So that could be thought of as wallets, the current nem-CLI tool, and anything else that would be kind of UI UX. So anything that is, again, wallets and the CLI tools, whether it's development or end user wallets for the cryptocurrency side, those would fall under the client group. If we go back, the next group, docs, we're kind of in that, and we'll be talking about the docs. That's self-explanatory. Testing is pretty self-explanatory as well. Just like docs is pretty overarching. Testing, anything testing related, will go under that group. Tooling and infra. Infra stands for, it's shortened English term for infrastructure. And this is kind of a starter group, but it'll grow as we add more tools. So currently the only tooling under the tooling and infrastructure group is what we refer to as the Bootstrap tool. And that's actually a very important tool for any of you developers. As you've probably been reading the documentation and other posts, it's kind of the go-to tool to get running with your own ledger. So within about 90 seconds or so, the tool will create a ledger for you on your local laptop or on a remote cloud machine. We have other tools that we're developing internally at Tech Bureau and with some partners. The updates to the tools and the new tools will be released open source as well. Pretty much everything we're doing kind of has that idea. So that's what the tooling and infrastructure group kind of stands for. And then I think that is currently the last special interest group. And the last one that we'll kind of briefly touch on is what we call the Apostle Working Group. So Apostle's been around since the early days of V1 NEM, and there's an ongoing effort on V2 that has already been underway by some interested folks in the community. So this highlights our currently what will be first of a few working groups. So the distinction between a working group and a special interest group is a special interest group is something that is pretty much core to the project. It's persistent, which means essentially it's almost always going to exist as a group. Working groups are typically have two areas to them. One of them is they might be temporary. It might cover a subject matter that only needs to be worked on for a small period of time. The other second factor of a working group is whether big or small, short or long effort, it's typically an effort that touches on multiple interest groups. So with Apostle, a good example of why it was a really easy first candidate is there's already work underway going on. So it's already kind of, let's say, established. The second one is Apostle is going to have an effect on potentially the API, obviously documentation, testing, and the SDK. And currently Apostle is existing as an outside community library. And at some point, depending on how the group evolves and how the community takes to it, it might become an internal officially supported one. So that's kind of to give you a high level of a distinction between a working group and a special interest group. So Apostle's the first one. We have a couple others that will probably be popping up over the next few weeks after the third release we're going to be having soon. And those will be posted and we'll do announcements. So that's kind of like a high level of interest groups and working groups. And then just some other things to touch on at a community level. If you touch on real quick, go to the code of conduct page, please, David.
Yep.
So this is actually borrowed from a popular template that a lot of open source projects were. Again, I won't go into detail. If you're interested, you can read it. At the end of the day, our code of conduct for the community is just be nice. Be nice and welcoming to people. We're a small and hopefully budding community that will grow. People are going to ask questions. There's no dumb questions. There's no small questions or big questions. Just you should be welcoming, and whatever it is, you should be nice to people. You shouldn't harass people. This goes without saying that this is for the online community in text chat form. So the primary chat's happening on our Slack channel.
Yep.
This is also on the mailing list. Right now, we're not actively pushing the mailing list, but for people that don't like live real-time chat and can pay attention to it, this code of conduct is for that. Also on GitHub, so if someone's posting an issue, you should be nice and welcoming, even if the issue is maybe not relevant. You can just point out that it's not ready for that pull request or something. Mm-hmm. And we don't necessarily call it out, and there's no formalized events or meetings yet for the community. But should the community be at a large or small event where they're commingling, just be nice. That's at the end of the day, is just treat people how you want to be treated, be nice, be welcoming. The more we're welcoming and the more people that participate in community, the more it should foster growth and participation. So that's kind of a code of conduct. Besides that, we'll be adding to the community repo. Again, think of it as like, from a documentation perspective, it's kind of documenting how the community is working. We also will be posting specific links around, each of the groups will have links to the mailing list, their relevant Slack channel. As we start scheduling regular meetings, we'll have links to the webinar meeting share, just like we have today when we start kind of doing them regularly. Besides that, if people have input, this is a GitHub repo, so treat it just like any other code repository or documentation repository. You can just file an issue if there's a typo or something you think is missing, or if you want to add to it, submit a pull request. So that's kind of it at a high level. The last thing I'll touch on is what we refer to as the PMC, or the Project Management Committee. And the Project Management Committee, this is just like kind of how we're running all of nemtech. The Project Management Committee is kind of borrowed from the concept that the Apache Software Foundation has greatly utilized. Similarly so, Linux Foundation projects, a little bit different, but kind of similar as well. But the Apache Foundation does a great job with what they call the PMC. And really all the PMC is, it's, think of it as relatively, let's say, neutral stakeholders and that are interested in the well-being of the project and the community. So we're not talking about code or in the case of NEM, the cryptocurrency side. It has nothing to do with any of that. It's basically like people that genuinely care and have been active contributors. Basically, the PMC is kind of the top-level decision maker, typically when it comes to conflict resolution. That's mostly where the Project Management Committee comes in. So the Project Management Committee will have decisions around, hey, there's some outdated code, should we deprecate it and get rid of it? Mm-hmm. Or, hey, the community is recommending that we have a new interest group for something else. do we want to do that, or should we just have them sit under another group for a while, and if it becomes too much, we'll break it out? That's typically where the PMC is coming in. Besides that, the PMC is in conflict resolution is if some committers from the community are maybe arguing over contributions that are overlapping. A good example would be maybe a wallet or a blockchain explorer where you have two groups that are trying to contribute essentially the same thing. The PMC will step in and be like, hey, you guys should be working together. So let's figure out how we can start from one code base and go from there. So that's kind of the goal of it and kind of how it works. Again, any other questions, just kind of, pop on, ask on the community or on the mailing list. And I think actually, David and Ivy, if you guys have any particular questions, you can ask them now. Else we can, I guess, kind of jump into the really core of why we're here to kind of dig into the actual documentation side.
I'm good.
Yeah, I think that we should focus more on the topic on the process. Well, it gathers the process of how to contribute towards the different projects hosted under the nemtech, and how the relation between the different groups is taken. It doesn't matter from which entity or from which, if it's community, if it's a particular person, or if it's a group of people, how these interrelations are more or less managed.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, we have definitely our group is actually, even though NEM's been around for a while, on like the open source project side, it's a small budding group, as I mentioned before, and there's different community and commercial kind of interest backing the project, which is great. And then the goal of it all is, again, to be as welcoming as possible and have more commercial entities that are investing time and money and employees to adopt the technology, contribute back. And so, yeah, that's what this whole kind of community project, open source efforts around is to hopefully foster that and be welcoming to everyone as much as possible.
Good. So, Ivy, did you have a question? Ivy?
No, I'm good. It's very clear explained.
Cool. So we should move to the next topic, which is the state of the documentation. In this session, we are going mainly to talk about the nemtech-sig-docs repository, as well as known as the NEM Developer Center. In other sessions, we will treat maybe another smaller repositories that we have right now, but this is the biggest one. And we can say that right now, the repository is like aligned with information of the latest released version that has code name Bison. You can find in the documentation information about the new account filters feature, as well as how state changes are persisted in RocksDB. So right now, what we are doing currently is to work on the documentation of cow new features that can be found in the GitHub repository in the Catapult server, the list of them. So basically, to do a quick summary, would be like to enhance harvesting configuration, being able to configure not only CHEM as the base token, you can like configure another token for private networks. Also the separation of mosaics from namespaces that we will review a little bit later. Some enhancements, some additions to the secret log transaction capabilities, adding another algorithms, and state change receipt capabilities that this is already available in this nemtech-sig-docs repository, that it's basically recording all the invisible state changes that happen when, for example, a transaction is announced. So there is ways to see what happened for a certain block and a certain transaction. Some state changes that right now were not able to be seen. For example, when you receive a fee from a harvester would be a kind of change that will be recorded. So we have like a warning here. We have some breaking changes in guides once we merge this cow release. because the mosaic is no longer tied to namespaces and the SDKs are not updated yet. So the approach we will take is to recommend in the guides to use the previous version until this is not like fixed in the SDKs, but we will explain how the new features work as well. And in the GitHub repository, you will be able to download a previous version of the documentation if someone needs it. So are there any questions about the current state of the docs?
No.
Okay, so the next steps, what we want to do after the merging this cow release that will happen like quite soon, it's to document the Dragon releases that as well are listed in the Catapult server repository. What is going to add new. Then we want to start writing a Catapult server reference that right now we don't have this information publicly available in the nem2-docs repository. So here is like some starting points to start thinking about how can we document all these package and a series of guides that would be like really interesting to have in order to be able to deploy at the end networks in production, and as well as deploying public network nodes in some point, change configuration parameters, how to add a new peer, how to bait a node if it's necessary. So all of this, we will try to document it. And I know that there are like some people that has already started to write blog posts and start playing how to deploy this network. So it will be appreciated if we can sum efforts in order to provide the best documentation possible. Because at the end, if we have a good documentation, it could be like really easy to onboard new people and make companies be interested in NEM technology. Okay, so would you add like something else as the next steps that you want to see in the documentation?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I mean, I would say it would be good to have, more, granted we can kind of push some of this ourselves, but more, more translations. I don't think we need, we don't need 10 languages, but I think it'd be good to have, a few more core ones, especially for, the APAC regions, which is obviously very, NEM interested. And then some other regions, through Europe. So yeah, I'd say maybe the improvements and what Japanese translation's already kicking off, I'd say continuing on with that. The biggest ones I would say definitely by far, besides the gap of us not having the core, call it server docs, and starting that effort, really more workshops and more guides. So that I think is those are core documentation's great and is essentially a requirement, but I would say the more guides, the more usage examples, and specifically the workshops, since those are kind of bigger, where someone can see like an end-to-end, like here's an idea through finished implementation for a certain concept. Getting contributions from those is, to your point, people are already doing kind of blog posts. So I think we can maybe start to come up with examples where someone does 1 or 2 blog posts, and then we can even do like maybe a documentation around, hey, here's documentation about how you can take ad hoc blog posts that you've done over some period of time and turn them into a workshop. Like here's just an example.
Yeah, sure.
Right? Whether we do it ourselves or we find someone in the community that's done some cool blog posts and we say, hey, can we work with you to turn these into a workshop? I think those constantly when I talk to people, core documentation is great, but they're always like, hey, I have an example I'm thinking about how to do, whatever. So like those are the first things that kind of pop to the front of my mind around the docs and, continually.
Yeah, I was thinking how to like involve more like different people, different entities in order to contribute more to guides, because at the end of the day, the person that is developing with NEM would be the one that would provide the standard practices and will know like more about the technology. And right now, like we are not giving that visibility in the nem2-docs. But I think that a good first step would be to start gathering all the links that people like has written about NEM Catapult development, put them in a folder under the nemtech community repository. And from there, if we see like the content is really, really good and we like it, like contact this person in order to, for example, transform this into a workshop, transform this into a guide, or just include it in the documentation as a reference that hey, you can, for example, do this in that way and give credit at the end of the day to this person that has worked on this concept and give some kind of attribution.
Yeah, actually, that's actually fantastic. So I just made a note of that in the notes for the meeting. And actually what I'll do today is I'll create a stub for that, and we can just kind of ad hoc do it and then just announce and say, hey, anyone who's interested, post an issue or just submit a pull request if you want to add links to your content. I think that'd be great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
Good. So let's move to the next topic. That it's like the new, the proposed documenting a new feature process. The objective this process is to enable collaboration between different special interest groups, as you already explained, what's an interest group. Include the docs in the definition of done, because right now the server or the code went out and the documentation was not ready. So we want to make closer documentation to development, let's say. Also enable the docs collaboration in different stages from community, from different involved parties, and increase the availability of new information regarding development, because right now we are like quite used to ninja releases, let's say, and we want to start providing more content in order that people can prepare in case that they are developing something and they know about a feature that it's like coming or already implemented, but only needs to be updated, for example, the SDK layer or the API layer, to wait or to contribute in order to make this feature happen. I think that this is like the main goal, the main three goals of this process. So I know that in this session, the process maybe won't be like fully explained, but I will go through the main processing blocks. If you are more interested, please go later to the NIP document, read it, and if is there something that it's not fully okay or any suggestion, please put a comment, and at the end we will review it. So the process is mainly divided in three different phases. Well, there are four. This would be like another phase that it's a little bit outside of the process. That would be like the specification of the feature needs to be ready in a form of an improvement proposal, and this should be accepted. So at this moment, when the proposal is accepted and it's involving a new feature, the NEM-docs repository will create a new branch with the ID of the NIP, but this does not mean that this feature will be like definitely added until it's not developed. So the second step would be like to wait until the feature is available in the Catapult server, and in the meanwhile, the documentation group will start working on the concept. That it's mainly a description of the feature, which is the schema that follows this feature, and a series of examples, like everyday uses that you can give to this feature in order to generate the concept. So once and only once the feature is ready in the Catapult server and published, this branch will be merged into the master branch. So at this moment, we can encourage, for example, the communication of the new feature. At this moment, we can also like start translations in different languages, maybe a little bit earlier, but to encourage that these translations are being done. The next phase would be like that the feature becomes testable. That means that there is an advancement and it's published, the Catapult server, the Catapult REST part of the feature. And that means basically to publish the Swagger specification, that it's the API reference, and also the list of required guides that the community can think around this feature. So we'll try to list them and open a new GitHub issues in order to enhance collaboration. In the next topic, we will see how to publish a new guide. So we will talk a little bit more about this later. And the last phase is when the feature becomes usable. So here, the CKPI, the SDK more related group inside this special interest group will collaborate with the sig-docs in order to provide the SDK reference that will be auto-generated. And at the end, also the guides that would be published in the docs once available. So if you want to know more, here is like the list of deliverables that has to be done and who is more or less responsible for each deliverable. So more or less all the process is self-contained, and we enable collaboration and know when things has to be done. So I don't know if you want to add something else, Nate or Evie, do you have any question?
Yeah,
No.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Evie. Yeah, so on my end, yeah, nothing too much. Just add, yeah, definitely we've kind of just been pushing stuff out as stuff's available. And so now we're getting to a level of, a couple, let's call it significant. What we're kind of looking at is GA type releases in these next couple of releases. There's going to be ongoing releases for a long time, but these next couple ones are really stabilizing releases and adding the last of the base, let's call it the MVP, the minimum viable product for private networks, and then the minimum viable product for public networks. And then everything else on top of that is additive. That's the way we're kind of looking at it. So I think this process is fantastic in that it puts the cart before the horse analogy, where it's the docs that are the horse that are kind of like pulling things along, even though the tech is really pushing it all, the design, the implementation, and then the docs are kind of coming out of it. But I think having docs as a lockstep feature at the same level as the code and testing, it just means it's a certain level of maturity and quality that we're going to be aiming for. So I think it's fantastic.
Good. I think Yoshi just joined the group.
Oh, did we get oh yeah, so we had a new person pop on. Hello, Yoshi. See, someone popped on.
Good morning.
And so yeah, we were just partway through talking about, David is just covering the improvement proposal for how we're going to try to put documentation at the forefront of the release process. But yeah, so that's kind of it. No other questions on my end.
Good. So I think that we are only one topic less, and we are on time. The meeting was expected to be 1 hour, and with this topic and open discussion, I think that we will cover it. So the next topic is how to write a guide in the NEM Developer Center. So as I said before, by using NEM, as a developer, we can find new ways to architect, for example, applications, or find situations or practices that can save time to other developers or make an application more secure. So helping other devs to learn this best practice with this objective, the NEM Developer Center handles a section to publish these guides and tutorials. So there is a guideline published that you can access here. So if you don't want to review later the video, it's all documented here in the guideline. but we will go like a little bit step by step. So the first step to write a guide is to get some inspiration. So basically, you can enter to the nem2-docs issues and see the list of available guides that are pending to be done. Right now, there are like 3. For example, the most easy one, in my opinion, would be to start for the renewing a namespace guide. But we will try to add plenty of guides, so there is content to be worked and improved. So if, for example, do you think that you have an idea? You can also create an issue. And I think that it's important to create an issue before start working in something you want to contribute at the end, you want to have it accepted. Because, for example, some other people can be working on it and then you can mix efforts in some of these guides. It's as easy as just open it, put a comment that, hey, I'm interested in working on this topic or contributing in this topic. And then some committer will say, okay, this is perfect, or just put in contact you with another person that can also help you and work together in a small group to publish this guide at the end. So this is covered more or less. To start writing a guide, the first thing you have to do is to clone the GitHub repository. Then make sure that you have Python installed and the pip as well, and install the requirements of the project that it's done with this command. This is like also documented, so we will not go step by step because it will take some time to download everything. But it's just these 2 commands, and then run the documentation to see that it's working and you can see the changes live. So I will like execute the command to build the docs live. That is different from Windows and from Linux and Mac. So basically what it does, it's building. And at the end, it will provide us with an URL where we can see like the documentation in our local machine, and then we can see the changes we are like doing. So to give you a little bit of insight about what technologies we are using Sphinx, that it's like a framework that enables you to pick a source file that in this case it's unstructured text, and it allows to publish it in different formats. For example, HTML for the web pages or documentation sites, and also PDFs, EPUBs, and a lot of different formats that maybe in the future it's interesting to explore. But not only that, it also has built-in translation tools that makes the documentation process easier. And we choose restructured text over Markdown because it's a little bit richer. It allows you to do more things. And as it works in Python, we can use a lot of plugins already done. So there is no need to recode basic things and functions that would be a little bit of a waste of time. And we can focus on documentation. So I will open the URL. And here you can see, after some seconds, the documentation built in my computer, right? So what we want to do is to create a new guide very quickly. So if I go back to the slides, I will first explain the process and then I will do it. So basically we have to create a new file, we recommend to use a template because we'll have like the same consistency as the other guides that it's in the guideline shared before. So here is the template suggested. That is basically explain in a line or in 2 lines what's the the objective, a little bit of background, necessary information that the person needs to know before starting the guide, some prerequisites, some other guides, for example, or some tools that this person needs to have installed. And then at the end, let's get into some code that would be like define step by step how this person has to code the feature in order to get the objective solved. And optionally, recommend an extra exercise, could be another guide, could be a blog post from another website to continue learning about this feature or another different one, but that can be combined with the first one. So also we share the restructured text cheat sheet, because you see there's some strange symbol. This is to make a title, for example. And you will see others while we like try to create our first guide and how we usually work. So then you will place the code examples in a specific folder that we will see. And at the end, after testing the changes, you will submit it to GitHub doing a pull request. So let's see a little bit the repository. Here under source guides, we have like the different guides listed, separated by topic. And the first one we will create is, for example, I propose to create a new kind for account. But I don't know if you have a title, but for example, we can invent like creating, for example, a new wallet, right? So what we would do is to add it. Well, I will stop this. So we will add it to the index. So it's here. So it's listed in the sidebar. So we will go to, well, it's not necessary because it will appear. It's an orphan guide, so it's not necessary. So we will pick the template. Copy it. And we will paste it here, right? So I need to format it a little bit. So you can put here your username, for example. We'll put my username. And let's see if all is correct. Okay, so here you see category. If I put account and save it and build the guide, wait some minutes, well, some seconds. It's not a minute. We'll see the changes and how this it's rendered in the documentation. So let's wait until it builds. We'll go to, we need to go to accounts. So we'll go to built-in features account. And then here we have all the guides. So let's wait until it's finished and we will like rebuild refresh the website, and we will see our guide in there if everything has gone well and if there is any error. Okay, so let's go here, we refresh. For some reason it's not appearing yet. Okay, because I'm in the main website, I will go to my local documentation. That's something you have to be a little bit to take care. And we go to account, and here we have the new guide we have created, right? So basically you have see here that it's rendered, and we have added a new feature that also puts the name of the author at the end. And if you do a click, you see all the posts written by this author and a link to their GitHub or whatever link they want to put. So I have already configured my profile, but if someone does a pull request, we will take care that it also has the link to whatever place they want to put. So if you want to add code, what we will do is to copy it from another guide because it will be easier. For example, this is rendering different codes in different languages. So what we should do is, for example, to copy this, put it here. We have to format it a little bit. Because if not, it won't work. Python works like this normally. So if you are used to work with Python, you won't have any problem. Okay, and we are missing also, we have picked the multi-level. Well, this is optional. There are like some links that will link directly to the code. You will see it now. So basically what this does is, okay, pick this file that it's under resources, examples, TypeScript account, creating a multi-level multi-sig account. So let's go there. So it's under, let's see, resources, examples, TypeScript, account, and creating a multi-level multi-sig account. Okay, I don't see it, but it should be there. Okay, here. Okay, so here we have the code, but we only want some lines to be rendered. So we put here like from the line 102 until the end, for example. And for Java, we will do it differently because it's a different file and we want another line. So we put it in there. And in the caption says view code and goes to the GitHub code. This is optional because we can add it later. But if I save it and I don't have any error and it rebuilds, we will see the code directly in the guide. A good practice is to like review another guide, like take some inspiration, for example, of what it's written, so you can see also how to add images, how to do letters in bold, how to organize the text differently. So there are like quite a few guides right now, and if you have some doubt, just look one that you like, how it's done, and then you can like copy more or less the structure and just add the new content. So if I refresh the website, I have this box here, that it allows me to change between different languages, TypeScript, Java, JavaScript, and also to go to the code in GitHub, because we only render like one small piece of code, not everything. It's only a subsection of the code, so we can go to GitHub in order if for some step we want to see it all because it's more clear, or we just want to copy and paste it. So it's really accessible. Okay, so we will just merge like the question for this topic with the open discussions. Do you have like any questions or anything else to talk about?
Yeah, nothing. This is Nate talking. Yeah, there's nothing specific, kind of additive. Just great little overview of kind of adding guides. And as I kind of mentioned earlier, I think things like guide contributions, people have limited time, but it's an easy way for them to learn and contribute at the same time. So I think this is a really good overview. So yeah, mostly just, good job with the overview. It all kind of makes sense. And I think definitely, as you kind of pointed out, like Sphinx is a very powerful documentation tool. And so as people kind of get into it, you can do, it's relatively easy to get into and get started. And then for those that want to be power users and contribute more advanced stuff, they can kind of dig in. So yeah, it's pretty cool how you can run a local dev environment.
Yeah. I want to add as well that if someone, for example, doesn't want to write a guide but has a good idea and has more or less a schema of the guide done, it can be like shared as well as a GitHub issue, and see if we can like find someone that wants to do this guide, or if it's just, for example, I have the guide in, let's say, Japanese or Spanish, and I want to publish as well in the nemtech-sig-docs. It's in there, and someone maybe wants to translate it into the base language that it's English for the nemtech-sig-docs, but then later as well apply this translation. So it's a good way of collaboration if it's everything open. As well, if you find some mistake in a guide, for example, you can go to the edit on GitHub and then directly do there the pull request. So it's quite easy to, well, quite not easy because it's, I don't like this word, but quite not so difficult to do.
Yeah, definitely straightforward. Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. I just added some notes to the meeting notes, and I'll fill out a little bit more. But yeah, I think as we can kind of point out to people. I think you're already using I noticed some stylized tagging or labels on the issues. I think we can kind of, add more over time, such as, hey, this docs, this guide's been added, but it now needs to be translated. So we can proactively post the English version. And then we could put in like a translation label request, and then those can be queued up, and whoever can take them on can do it. And then subsequently, I also made a note to your point of, some people might say, I would like to see a guide, right? So I'd like to see a guide that talks about this or that explains this, because that's what I'm trying to solve. But I don't know how to do it myself. So if anyone can show me, and then sometimes people might be like, well, I don't have time to show you myself, but I'll put some notes in like a gist or a blog post. I don't have time to do a full guide. Again, it's just incrementally that can like spawn some content. So, definitely training people to, there's nothing wrong with creating issues. So even if an issue gets closed over time, it's like people should almost create issues first and then worry about how things get filled in or what the life cycle is after the fact. So I think that's a good point you bring up.
Feedback and issues, in my opinion, are like totally fine. I mean, it helps to get the content better. So issues are encouraged to be done at least in this repository. So
yeah. Wonderful.
Okay.
So that was it from my end.
Okay. Another point, like to open discussion, we talked it before start recording, but I think it's good to like mention it here, is that we will probably have a meeting of each SIG once a month, probably. But if for some reason there is no topic to talk, maybe we jump it or we postpone it some weeks until there is topic. There is no like need to do meetings each month if there is no like any advancement or nothing has to be shared.
Yeah. So yeah, kind of as we'll do like, I think for right now, let's take the mindset that we'll do monthly meetings. And then the meetings will happen as needed. So if we schedule it, like we're doing this one today on, January 24th. So we'll target, in the next week or two, we'll target the February one and like post it early. And if we get to it and we don't need it, we'll just push it out weeks or whatever. Or vice versa. If we're waiting till, February 24th and it's the 17th or something, or the 20th, and something comes up, we'd be like, hey, it'd be really good if we do this early. I mean, I think typically the early ones won't happen. I think we would probably preemptively schedule an early one. I think typically those will probably pop up more where there's content that won't fit in, we want to try to keep them to around an hour or so. So if we say, hey, there's a lot of content, so we're going to break this into 2 meetings. We'll do one this week and one next week. I think that's where we'll kind of get in more than a month. And I think most of the groups will kind of be the same, where I think active working groups will probably be more weekly as active coding's going on. Again, that's a little bit more technical kind of code review, updates, questions, going over bug reports and stuff. But yeah, it definitely makes sense. So I think we'll probably see in the next week. We'll schedule the quote unquote February meeting for docs. And then we'll just go from there, and we'll start like soliciting questions and content, and kind of let the agenda kind of fill itself out based on feedback from what people are asking.
Good.
Perfect. Well, yeah, I guess anything else from anyone else, a question or comment wise?
Thank you, David, for making this guideline very clear and easy to follow. From my side, aside that can contribute on the documentations, for whatever documentation I do, I can translate it into Chinese. Other than that, I will contribute if needed for the translation, or else I'll just let the community to do it.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Definitely, I think, again, we don't need tons of languages, but I think the more we have, again, it's just, it catches the percentage of people, right? So whether it's 1%, one person, or 100 people, it gets them over the hump as far as getting into the project and understanding things.
Maybe in the next meeting we can write this down. What we should do is to do a hands-on on how to use things to translate the NEM documentation. Because in the next meeting, I expect to have improved a little bit some pages that right now are not translatable, that we have learned in the Japanese, with the Japanese translation. And since then, try to encourage a little bit more translation into different languages, because I think it's important. Not everybody understands English, and reading something in your main language, it makes easier to learn something. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it sounds good. So I just added that as in the meeting notes, which we'll post. Possible next meeting topics. So I added translations and Sphinx overview. We can use the Japanese one as the example, and then we'll keep adding, right? So as other kind of topics pop up, we'll kind of add to it in the coming week. But yeah, that definitely sounds good. I think the other thing we can do, actually add this as well, is, highlight community contribution, where, some things are already being posted by the community, whether it's blog posts or in the case of Doka, where he had the schema, he just generated the schema and then posted it on a website. We can kind of just highlight those. I mean, obviously, actually we can go over the schema one, and we can actually use that as yet another example, as more from a process. Hey, he posted this, kind of almost like storytelling. Hey, he posted this online. He posted a link and shared it. He then opened an issue, and we can just touch for a couple minutes on that process, and it just kind of educates people on hey, it doesn't have to be so formalized. You can kind of ad hoc do stuff, and then over time contribute it via, using issues as kind of the gateway. Ask questions on Slack, post issues, and then everything will kind of progress from there.
Yeah. Right now, the Twitter account, it's a little bit stopped, but maybe we can use it as well to promote this kind of contributions that the community does. So maybe in another meeting, we can talk about how the Twitter or social media accounts will be managed, and try to assign at least some persons that keep them up to date.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Social media. 1 second, just making a note of that. Contribution and promotion. Okay, just put a little note about that. So what I'll do is, I think that's about it. So what I'll do is, we're recording this. I will hopefully I'll try to do it all tonight. If not, I'll finish it up tomorrow. I will, we'll share a link to the slides, to the recording and to my notes, which the notes are a little bit additive to the slides. I kind of followed the flow as we're going. But we'll post all of those three, and then actually I'll do a pull request merge up into the community repo, and we'll post it as a link to like the first meeting in the sig-docs page, right? So it's kind of create a paper trail, and then we'll share that on Slack. Again, whoever's interested can consume it.
Okay.
We'll kind of
if you want, I can like review some kind of a template for the minutes and first like uploading it to, for example, Google Docs. I do the template doing the first minutes summary, and then we post as well a template for every minute, so they follow more or less.
Yeah, definitely, because we will want. I'll get this kind of page cleaned up, and then I'll shoot it over to you, and then we can kind of like templatize it from there. Because definitely, the goal is to kind of have, not everyone can be on every meeting. And so, for instance, like next time I might not be able to make it for whatever reason. So someone else can take notes. Or maybe I'll be doing more presenting next time. So someone else can take notes while I'm presenting, right? So definitely having it templatized is definitely good. So yeah, I'll shoot that over, and we can templatize from this base first version and go from there. But and that definitely awesome overview, David, and thanks everyone else for joining. And if there's no other kind of questions or comments, we can end here, and then see everyone online.
Yeah, thank you for joining, and the conversation continues in Slack.
Yep. Talk to you guys. See you guys online.
See you. Bye.
Bye.